Now in front of you, this is author's natal horoscope. Regular chart wheel, pizza pie kind of a chart. If we put him on 360-degree dial, right, we now have a year breakout for this chart. And we can begin to move this wheel, create various pictures. We can use it as an aspectarian. We can do a variety of things with it. But we're going to move on. Now, from this loader wheel, we can go and create the polar azimuthal. This is a chart that has this dot in the center is the North Pole, and it's like a flattened sphere so that the whole South Pole is this outer circle. So you can see this blue line going around is all of Antarctica. And now, in between the South Pole and the North Pole is a green circle, 90 degrees from either position.
Yes.
This is set for New York City, so we have a zenith point right here on New York City. And from that, 90 degrees in all directions is our horizon. So the red line becomes our horizon.
Okay.
The off-centered black line becomes the ecliptic. And you'll note that each planet is their zenith, the place where they're directly overhead is a dot, and you'll see, for example, in this case, the latitude of the moon is north. Right? We can see that the latitude of Pluto is very far north, off the ecliptic, whereas Saturn is slightly south of the ecliptic. This makes for interesting things when we move this dial around. Now, Arthur is born with Jupiter setting. And that would mean that his partners were very important and would aid him later on in life, such as myself. Okay. But let's take that Jupiter and let's move it to the IC. And if we put the Jupiter on the IC, we see that the moon sets along with the sun and Venus. And he was a very social man for a Scorpio. If we move that Jupiter to where its actual zenith is on the horizon, or rising physically, right, there is nothing angular. And if we move that Jupiter up to the midheaven, right, there is nothing angular. But when that Jupiter sets, the ascendant rises, it's right on that real descendant, and when that Jupiter is on the IC, every day it will connect the sun and Venus and the moon. So it becomes a very strong factor. We will not see these things in the horoscope because these are mundane combinations. They're in mundo. And this is the actual breakdown, or the way we actually see things in the sky. So the Earth turns every day and takes the planets with it. And as it turns, we have a different kind of astrocartography. We have the places on the Earth where the planets actually go overhead directly, right? So for example, if we're following this Jupiter, we can see that the Jupiter goes through central India, goes through the Middle East, goes through Morocco, goes through Cuba, right, and then goes right around through Mexico, right through Mexico City, through Hawaii, right, all the way up to back to the Pacific again, where it was born. Okay. So Arthur was born with Jupiter out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But if he were to go to Cuba, he would have a good time. If he were to go to Morocco, he would have a good time. Yes. And if he were to go to the parts of India, they'd probably treat him as a spiritual man. So this chart form, we can do many, many things with it, right? But it is a great teaching tool because it has all 5 great circles and it shows us how they interact. We can see things like the vertex, the east point, and then see how the planets interact with them. This will be a chart form of the future. Now, the outer wheel is a 360-degree dial, and right now is set up to be right ascension. But I could make it ecliptic longitude by just moving where the lines are. Now, from this concept, right, the natal planets are moving around through the course of the day, rising, culminating, and setting. We came up with the idea of the Paran clock to make a clock, which is what I originally wanted to do in the 70s. Okay. So to make a Paran clock, right, we take off this chart and we go to this thing called this loader, and we load in Paran positions.
I think the Chalcedony was being...
And we come up with this clock. Here, let me make a statement. We come up with this clock where the interior is civil time. So this is noon, 6 o'clock, midnight, etc. The outer wheel is sidereal time. And every day, the difference between sidereal time and civil time is about 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 56 seconds. So this chart is going to move backwards. The time is going to move backwards every single day by 3 minutes, 56 seconds. So you may have your natal Jupiter rising in the middle of winter.
Oh, that's great.
At one time of the year, but at another time of the year, it may be on the midheaven. So at the same time of the day. Now, if we look at the breakout on the wheel, we can see that these are planetary positions relative to the angles. So this would be the time today when his natal Uranus will set. Shortly after, a half hour later, his natal Saturn sets. But when his natal Saturn sets, Neptune is on the midheaven. Shortly after that, at 4 in the afternoon, his Mercury will be on the midheaven, his Moon will be on the midheaven, and so will his Mars. Right? But if we follow that Uranus and we drop down, we drop down, we drop down, we see that when Uranus is on the IC, Pluto is setting.
I'm going to go upstairs.
And that's something you won't see easily. If we drop down and look at that Uranus a little further, right, we start looking, when the Uranus is rising, that's the E, the Pluto is on the IC. But yet, when the Uranus sets, there's no Pluto, there's Saturn nearby. So we have different conditions during the course of the day. Now, this is a great little planning tool because we can look at the course of the day, and if we get a telephone call, say at, let's find a nice combination here, at 5 o'clock, right, Jupiter will be setting. But if we get and we should pick up the phone, it might be good. Yeah. But if we get a telephone call at 1:45 and Saturn is setting, let it go to the machine. Don't pick it up. So just in the course of the day, this becomes a very simple tool to guide one's life. And every day, this relationship will slightly change. The planet positions will remain the same, but they'll move backward in time. Now, you can change these relationships by moving in latitude, north or south in the world. So if we move to the north or we move to the south, you're going to have different planets rising and culminating in different relationships than at the natal position. If you go east and west, they will remain the same. So it's critical when you're going to do an astrocartography that you're conscious about moving north or south if you really want to affect a change. Moving east and west may bring your Jupiter to the ascendant or may bring Venus to the midheaven where you would like to see it, but it's not going to change your natal patterns. Your natal patterns will only change going north or south physically on the Earth. Right? So the Paran clock becomes a really playful and useful item. I have the house cusps in here just because they're there, but I could get rid of them, and it's a great little tool. Now, other things that are going on in here, there are other things that are going on in this program, and that is that when we work with dials, right, the dials are oops, I'm sorry, let me kill this chart here. When we work with the dials are highly interactive features. You know, when we work with the 90-degree dial, which is the candy of Uranian astrology, right, you'll see that we have this tie-in to this working data, as I mentioned earlier. So that if I right-click on the transits, it's going to be for September 2nd, 2019. And I can change that date at will. I can move those transits ahead or behind at any rate I want. I have it set up right now for an hour, but I could turn that rate into 30 days and move the transits around 30 days against the natals. Now the transits are the long lines, the natals are the short lines. Okay. And we can then interact various things. Now, the 90-degree dial gives us great precision. This whole space is a single degree. Right? This black band is 5 degrees. So we have a big space. So we can discern the space between the ascendant and the Mercury here is minutes of arc. The ascendant is at one fixed 9, and the Mercury is at one fixed one. There's this 8-minute opening, but we can actually see the opening. And it's an 8-minute opening. That means in timing, something will hit that Mercury first, and it won't be for a month and a half later till it actually connects to his ascendant. When we do a direction or something like that. So the dial is very precise and very useful. In addition, we can ask questions. One of the virtues of the Uranian system is the ability to ask questions. So I can ask in this chart, for example, if the sun is the body, right, and the node has to do with connection. Well, the connection of the sun and the node means the connection of the physical body. If I drag that node to the sun, I'll get to the midpoint or equidistant point of the sun node midpoint. And then we could see that if a transit or a direction goes over there, it's going to connect the sun and the node to the physical body. So is this going to happen to him all the time? No. It's only going to happen because it's unoccupied. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. But if something does cross those points, it will bring this picture into focus, and he will then begin to experience physical connection, right? Or a connection to the Father.
What are those green and red lines inside the circle?
The green and red lines are solar arc guides.
Okay.
Now, we don't consider the solar arc to be an absolute position, right? We take the arc between the progressed sun and the natal sun, and we call that the solar arc. Here's author's solar arc at 78, 34, and 13, right? So that means that if we get the natal sun and the progressed sun arc equaling something else in the horoscope, they do not have to be on it. We will resonate, and the two energies will vibrate together and create an event. Okay, so we can have two ways of transiting things. I could have, say in this case, right, we see that, let's go back home, turn these transits on, right, we can see in this, home and other transits, so you guys have home and other transits. There we go. Cut that out. Home. I'll move it. Let's turn the transits on. There we go. Why is it changing? Hold on a second.
Oh, yeah.
No, there's something going crazy. Author would do this from the grave anyway. But let me go back home. Let's bring everything home. Is there anything on here that I don't know about? No. So let's see. And we're going to put the transits on. Here's our transits. Okay. And the transits in this case are small. I like working with the smaller transits because we can do more with them. But in author's case, we can see that in another day, and then a day and a half, the transiting sun Mars is going to be going over his Saturn.
Yes.
You see? So that would be a direct hit. But we would want to look at the natal Sun-Saturn picture, in this case, right, to see what the condition is of his natal Sun-Saturn. And it really isn't carrying too much with it. So when the sun actually hits it, for him, it won't be a major event. It'll mean the bills are due, he has to do something that he didn't get done correctly in the first place, that sort of thing. But to give you an example of a dual picture, let's take the moon, Venus, right? And we'll see that it stands with the midheaven and transiting Pluto. So when author, and he has a natal Pluto here as well. So when author falls in love, it changes his life, right? And at this point in time, when he is involved, right, if we say the picture, right, Venus plus the moon minus midheaven is my, the midheaven is the my, the I. So my emotional love is now conditioned by transiting Pluto. I personally, midheaven, am changing Pluto, my attitude about how I deal with the public in a social sense, and how I deal with my own Plutonian energy. Because that's midheaven, Pluto equals Pluto as well. Yeah. Right? So it's a very strong combination. We can then take this picture and direct it by solar arc, move it by the opening of the natal minus the progressed sun minus the natal and move it forward. So we would turn this off switch on, and it would tell us that the Jupiter and the moon are hitting this off exactly, and where Arthur is now being immortalized on a video that other people will watch.
Yes.
So he's getting publicity
Of
through the
course.
moon Venus, which is my public persona, how the public likes me, and I'm already dead. And I'm changing. And you'll see that that natal
That's
Jupiter
Pluto.
is due with his natal Pluto through the little lines. Now, to go back to your original question, what are the green and red lines?
Okay.
And the green and red lines are various permutations of the solar arc. So if I take his arc of 77 degrees and 59 minutes, right, and I move, I count 30, 60, 70, 78, 77 and 59 minutes, right, because that's what it is 77, 59. We come over here, and this would be his direct solar arc. If I count that backwards, 30, 60, 70, 8, we get the converse solar arc position. If I count the same thing from the 45, or the opposite here, right, I go around this wheel, and I would come up with this position here, which would be his converse solar, which would be his solar arc from the 45, and I would come up with this position here, which would be the converse of the 45. So those are the straight solar arcs. If we double the solar arc, that's the longer lines. If we halve the solar arc, that's the shorter lines. So the half solar arc, which is the midpoint between progressed and natal sun, the double solar arc, which is if you put the pointer on the sun and take away the progressed sun, you double that arc, are all sensitive arcs, and they all connect natal sun to progressed sun, which is why the solar arc works, because it's always going to connect those very two important personal points that have to do with your will and the directions in your life. So in this particular situation, I'm going to put some simple transits on, and I'm going to move through time and show you the relationship, how the solar arc relationship makes a unique pattern. Watch those red and green lines as I move this through time. I'm going to move it in 30-day intervals so you can see it quickly. Now notice that the lines are splaying apart and that they're creating unique patterns all over the horoscope. Now, if anything falls on these lines, it means they're due right now with the cardinals or whatever I put the pointer at. But you see how now they're converting, they're converging, they're converging, they're converging, they're converging, and then bing, they come out the other side. Right? Now, if I take the pointer and put it on the sun axis, all I have to do is look at these lines, and I can estimate when something is going to hit. So I can look at the sun and I can say that since the straight solar arc always moves in a counterclockwise direction, it will hit the Mars in about 1 degree and 10 minutes. And that's about 1 year and 2 months. So in 1 year and 2 months, his natal sun will be due with the Mars. I see this very quickly. I don't have to do any calculations for this. Right? So this becomes a very simple tool to use. If I put the pointer on the Venus, we're going to do the same thing with the solar arc. That same arc is going to come to the Mercury and the Ascendant in about 15 minutes of arc. That would be about 3 months of time. The Uranus was just hit last month. You can see the opening here is very small, even on the camera, but you can see there's an opening here. And this arc went in the counterclockwise direction, and it went forward, and it passed the Uranus. This tool allows us to predict rapidly. So I can take this thing, I can put on the transits, and I can begin to direct pictures, features, and start to look for when things, what we say, come due. So the planets come due.
I'm curious about the Transneptunians, Arthur Blackwell Transneptunians. Okay.
We can turn the Transneptunians on with a single switch. And the Iranian system's transnepts, understand something. The Transneptunians of the Iranian system give the Iranian system a very bad name because the people who don't like the Iranian system can say, oh, you people are playing with planets that don't exist.
Yes.
Funny people, you know, what are you, crazy? But the truth is that Vitta proposed the Transneptunians to prove astrology. And he found them by working in World War I with the big battles. He was an artillery captain.
Yes.
And he had information about the battles before they would occur. So he would do the charts, and he began to notice things moving that weren't real. As he began to experiment with this, he came up with 8 factors. They range from orbits of 262 degrees a year, 262 years for a cycle, to 720 years for a cycle.
I used the bubble
Okay.
50 years later, the Kuiper belt is proposed. And the definition of the Kuiper belt by the astronomers is orbital elements of 239 years to 650 years. Why did Vitta only find planets in the Kuiper belt? 50 years before the Kuiper belt is even proposed, and he defines the Kuiper belt 50 years before it's proposed. It's another 20 years before anybody finds any planets. Kuiper belt was proposed in 1951. It isn't until 1980 that we find Sedna and the other planet, begin to find the other planets, 1990, we begin to find Sedna and the other planets in the Kuiper belt. Now they're finding thousands of bodies in the Kuiper belt, right? Vitta only discovered 8 of them. That's all he needed to discover. And they determined the belt. Yeah. These planets do define information that moves in periods and orbits larger than Pluto. So they talk about societal changes. They talk about governments and the rise and fall of civilizations. When we apply it to a natal horoscope, we're going to get large pieces of information that are going to talk about our connection to the society, to the larger realm of things.